my first and last Larp session. This happened when I was just starting college. I've never been a social person, and making friends has always been hard for me. So one of my objectives was to find a group of like-minded people, aka nerds, and join them. This happened rather sooner than expected, and before I knew it, I was hanging out with a group of 4. King, Queen, Jack, and myself. King had a background as a longtime role-playing veteran, an overall fantasy nerd with a particular fixation on Tolkien. Queen was a metalhead with a thing for Vikings and Norse mythology, while Jack was an older guy who enjoyed poetry and the theatrical arts. I, for my part, had some experience playing vampire and werewolf and enjoyed role-playing in video games, especially MMOs, but I wasn't familiar with D&D at all. Despite the fact we hung out together in classes and in between them, we really didn't know much about each other. We all came from different backgrounds and had just banded together simply because some shared interests, but that was it. Calling ourselves friends was a stretch at this point, which is why it took me by surprise when King invited all of us to participate in a LARP session. He was organizing with another group of friends of his. I was hesitant, but seeing as Jack and Queen were going, I decided to tag along. Now, at that point, I had not even a remote idea of what LARPing was all about. It was explained to me very briefly, but when the bus came to pick us up to take us to our destination, I still had many unanswered questions. Things immediately took a turn for the worse when I realized Jack had bailed on the whole affair and it was just Queen, King, myself, and like 20 other people I have never seen in my life, inside a bus heading God knows where. Of course, they all knew each other from years ago and were having a good time joking and catching up. Meanwhile, King had promptly taken Queen to her side as her guest and introduced her to the rest of the gang, leaving me aside to endure the 2-hour-long ride by myself. I felt nothing but anxiety the entire time and couldn't utter a word to anyone, and no one approached me either. When we finally arrived, I was alone amongst a sea of people, had no idea where I was or what I was supposed to do. That's when King explained the game to us. We were supposed to play pre-assigned characters during an entire day and night cycle, 24 hours, each with their own agendas and objectives. The idea was to achieve our respective goals and, during the morning of the next day, tally up the results in order to determine a winning faction and character. Now, this was more up my alley, and I immediately felt determined to play my character as best as I could. However, when I received his sheet, I was kinda conflicted. My character was a thief. Or not even a thief, he was more of a peasant that wanted to steal something of value from the king. You can imagine who played him. To enrich himself and his band of rogues. The band in question was composed of 3 people that knew each other but didn't know me, so they decided to work together and ignore the fact that I was also part of their faction. I was, again, left alone to try to harvest some fun out of this whole thing. I tried to track down Queen, but it turned out she was also part of King's entourage, so there was no approaching her without arguing or angering the guards. I realized I need to actually describe the play arena so you can get an idea of where everyone was located. Imagine a circle of around 20 meters of diameter of flat land in the middle of a field surrounded by a thick pine forest. On the northern part of the circle were the tents of the royals, aka King, Queen, and a couple of others, which was guarded by 2 guards at all times. On the eastern and western parts of the circle were smaller tents with different equipment and the players' belongings, and in the middle was a sort of open area with logs and stones to roleplay interactions among players. It wasn't a very big arena, and it was quite awkward to move around because you ended up bumping onto people simply by moving from one spot to another. Seeing as I had no teammates and my in-real-life friends were role-playing effing each other's brains out, I decided to pursue my agenda on my own, which basically translated to me stealing a jewel from King's tent and fence it with another player to pocket some nifty profit. Easy enough. I sneaked past the guards and crawled under it, sure I hadn't been seen by the guards or the people outside. I was about to start snooping around when I heard someone approaching from the front. I pocketed some valuables, but when I was about to sneak out, I heard, "Stop or perish, fool." It was King. He had caught me red-handed. I roleplayed some excuse, got on my knees, and begged for his forgiveness, trying to play the whole "my wife is so sick" card. But King, being the petty asshole he always was, decided to call the guards anyway and make an example out of me. "Chop his head off for everyone to see," he demanded, with a shit-eating grin. The guards obeyed and dragged me out of the tent, kicking and screaming for my life. They then improvised a chopping block with a stump in the middle of the arena, and before you knew it, I was dead. I had played a grand total of 23 minutes. At this point, it is important to mention that this game was supposedly hardcore, meaning no magic and no resurrecting were allowed. If you were killed, that was it. You were out. Of course, seeing as the theme of the game was mostly about and politics, there wasn't really much of a chance for anyone to get killed at all. So much so, in fact, that I was the only one who died. The organizers hadn't anticipated this would happen, so they asked King what to do with my limp body, and he simply said, "Throw it to the pigs," which meant leave him inside of one of the tents. After that, I don't know how much time passed because I fell asleep. I could faintly hear people playing, moving about, and laughing. But I was just so tired of it all that I simply dozed off, covered by coats that didn't belong to me. At some point, a couple of girls came into the tent, made an improvised ritual over my head, said I was free to live again, and then left. I saw them leave and proceeded to continue sleeping. What finally woke me up was hunger and being cold. That's when I realized it was nighttime, and that I had slept for the best part of the day. I scurried out of the tent just in time to see the game crumble under its own pretentiousness. You see, apparently there were supposed to be monster attacks during the night, but people were so tired and hungry that they didn't really care about the monsters, and ended up inviting them to eat at the camp, which the monsters promptly accepted, thus shattering the whole illusion. King was furious that his event had been hijacked, and I saw him berate his staff in front of everyone, but in the end he had no choice but to accept it. People were drinking beer and playing with foam swords. I blindly approached the main campfire to find Queen completely drunk, singing some weird song in a language I didn't understand. She saw me, greeted me, and handed me a plate with bread and some meat, which I devoured instantly. I spent the next hours lip-syncing to songs I didn't know, surrounded by people too drunk to care about my existence. This was probably the highlight of the entire trip, to be frank. Also, at some point I got up, grabbed a foam sword, and dueled with another guy that went all Naruto on me. We exchanged blows, but I hit him in the head a little too hard, and people gave me the stink eye for not being a good sport. I didn't give a shit. It felt pretty good. The next morning, I was ready to leave and never come back. I was tired, my body was sore, I was cold, and had eaten very little. When they announced the winners of the game, take a fat guess who was a deserving champion. Why, of course, King and Queen. People clapped, but I don't know if it was truly sincere. When the bus was about to arrive, King asked me if I had enjoyed the session, and I looked him in the eye and told him, "You killed me on the first hour." He paused for a second, looked around, and then laughed it off as if what I said was a joke. "What a D," I muttered as I walked into the bus. On the ride back, Queen sat by my side and apologized for leaving me behind, but she simply had so much fun she forgot about me. I shrugged and told her she wasn't my mom, so she shouldn't feel guilty. She asked me if I wanted to return for another session. F no. I simply said as I put on my headphones and drifted away from this miserable experience. TLDR, tried to take part in a Larp session to bond with new friends, ended up feeling lonelier than ever. So that one was a little bit of a crazy story. I've never LARPed at all, but I've always been a bit too afraid to because of the fact that you are kind of stuck with a lot of people you don't know. I do know that a lot of people do really like LARPing though, and it's kind of sad that this person didn't have the exact same, experience. They were stuck with King that wanted to take all of the attention, and then Queen just kind of left them alone too. And it was pretty crappy that they were in the game for 30 seconds, and that was it. By the way, this is my new, I don't know how to say it. This is my new VTuber. I haven't thought up if her name's gonna change or not, or if it's still gonna be Lisa. But it's, I've been playing around with Vroid Studio and I've been slowly getting better, and this is my latest creation, and it's one that I am super proud of, and I really hope you all like her too. Just let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.